Welcome. I am your host, Jungle Brother, coming at you with the first ever podcast dedicated to Lewis Hamilton. Not Formula One, but to Lewis Hamilton. This podcast will be about Lewis, nothing but Lewis, and for Lewis. We're going to start with what happened in the Singapore Grand Prix for 2019. Coming into the Singapore Grand Prix, Lewis was leading the championship 284 to 221 over his teammate Valtteri Bottas. Won 8 races out of 14. You had Lewis winning 8. You had his teammate Valtteri Bottas winning 2. You had Max Verstappen winning 2. You had Charles Leclerc winning 2. So the last time Formula One seen a high downforce track was in Hungary. Singapore is classified as a high downforce track. So the last time Formula One seen a high downforce track, it was all about Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen battling it out, with Lewis Hamilton coming out on top because he's not the 5-time world champion for nothing. Those of you that are new to Formula One, you might not know, if you hearing a Formula One podcast for the first time through my podcast, it's the Team Lewis Hamilton podcast, and you don't know anything about Formula One, let me tell you here, Lewis won 5 world championships. He's won 81 races. Only one has more world championships than Lewis Hamilton is Michael Schumacher, with 7. Only one who has won more races than Lewis Hamilton is Michael Schumacher at 91. Lewis has 81. And Lewis Hamilton is still only 34 years old, so he has a lot of racing left. A lot of folks looking for Lewis to retire, but he's not going anywhere. Kimi Räikkönen, oldest man on the grid, is 39. 5 years older than Lewis Hamilton. Usually when a Formula One driver leaves the top team, he sticks around and he go to the midfield to finally get phased out. Last world champion that had a long career that didn't go to the midfield was Alain Prost. But he left unexpectedly for the 94 season because he didn't want to partner Ayrton Senna. So Lewis Hamilton has the goods. He's in the prime of his life, and he's not going anywhere. So as a big time Lewis Hamilton fan, I'm looking forward to him surpassing Schumacher in wins at least. He should, this time next year, surpass Schumacher on 91 wins. But let's get back to the Singapore Grand Prix. Now that you caught up with the backstory on Lewis Hamilton credentials, everybody, all the pundits, was predicting that this is going to be a fight between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen of the Red Bull, because their cars is equipped with the most downforce competitively. Ferrari was almost a lap behind the 2 Red Bulls and Mercedes in Hungary. So they was a non-factor, even though they dominated the last 2 races in Spa, Belgium, and Monza, Italy. Nobody had them winning in Singapore. First practice on Friday, Max Verstappen was on top. Second practice, Lewis Hamilton was on top. So everything was going chalk. Everything was going how people expected, but Ferrari showed a little speed. More speed than they shown in Hungary. So everybody had their eye on, it looks like this is going to be between Mercedes and Red Bull. Ferrari might be in the mix. Come qualifying on Saturday. Let's go, before we go to qualifying, let's go to free practice 3. Ferrari showed a lot of speed. Charles Leclerc was the quickest. Now I'm going on memory now. I don't have the stuff in front of me. I'm going on memory. I don't like doing my podcast with a whole bunch of notes in front of me. I like giving it to you raw of my memory. So if this is wrong, you can email me. You can comment in the chat when you hear this podcast, or you can email me at junglebrotherradio@yahoo.com if I say anything that's not accurate. Q1, Ferraris were real quicker than anybody expected. Same goes for Q2, but problems with Mercedes and Lewis started with Mercedes came into Q1 on qualifying that Saturday using medium tires. That was a big mistake, and that huge mistake will be glaring in Sunday's race. But on Saturday, the strategy should have been start Q1 on softs, Q2 on mediums, because whatever you qualify your fastest speed in Q2 is what you had to start the race with. Okay? So Mercedes started Lewis out with medium tires. Then on Q2, it started him out on the faster soft tires. Didn't make any sense. They still have not answered to why they started Lewis on medium soft instead of soft medium. Nobody's asked that question. I've looked all the websites, and I haven't seen nobody bring that up. The medium tires are more durable. They last longer. They have a longer shelf life. And I believe the medium tires, the C5 compound, the medium tires, the C4 compound, the soft tires, the C5 compound. What that mean, I don't know. But that's what they say when you watch the race. I was watching qualifying. I was like, that don't look good, because you don't really want to start your driver on soft tires because they got to pit early. And when you pit early, you got to deal with the midfield. And you're going to get behind some slow cars. If you start on mediums, you can build a gap. And then when you pit for your one and only time, you'll be in front of the midfield runners. You don't have to worry about them being a moving chicane for you. Well, they qualified on softs. They ventured on to Q3, and Lewis missed pole by 150th, 1/10 of a second to Charles Leclerc. Even though he started on the front row, he didn't get pole, which is not bad. Which is surprising because Ferrari wasn't known to have downforce, particularly on the front end of their cars, so they would struggle on a high downforce track like Singapore. So the question is, where did Ferrari get this downforce? The qualified from the Mercedes. Now, the Red Bull historically and this year has proven has the best downforce car. Ferrari has the most powerful engine. What Mercedes have in their bank is Lewis Hamilton. He knows how to set up a car on a downforce track and a high speed track that doesn't require a lot of downforce. So already they was behind the 8 ball, but I figured Lewis Hamilton can beat him eventually. But coming into the 2019 Singapore Grand Prix, they had some modifications on the track. 2018, you had 2 corners where you could overtake. They modified the track, so now there's only 1. And in a turn 1 is a chance to overtake, but that's following a long straight. And this year, Ferrari has proven difficult to pass because of their frontline speed, which proved evident when Lewis tried to get past Leclerc in Monza last week. Excuse me. So Lewis started behind second, got off to a real good start. He was harassed by third place runner Vettel, but after lap 1, Lewis was ahead. Everything was going according to plan. Like I said, Leclerc was on pole. Lewis started second. Vettel for Ferrari started third. Max Verstappen started fourth. Valtteri Bottas of Ferrari started fifth. Alexander Albon started sixth, where he's supposed to have that Red Bull, so he's doing a good job. Carlos Sainz with McLaren, he started seventh. Nico Hülkenberg of Renault started eighth. Lando Norris of McLaren started 10th, and Giovinazzi of Alfa Romeo started 10th. So after lap 1, Leclerc was leading. Lewis Hamilton was second, and the running order stayed the same. Lewis was second, Vettel was third, Max was fourth, Bottas was fifth, and Alexander Albon was sixth. And it stayed that way for 25 laps, because Charles Leclerc and Ferrari, they're not easy on those tires. So their plan was to drive slow and conserve their tires to last long, because this is going to be a one-stop race. And when they got off those soft tires, they're going to go to the hard tires. Now the race is 61 laps. The hard tires is graded to go maybe 30, 35 laps max. So they needed those soft tires to last 30 laps. 25 minimum. 25 minimum. So it was a snail's pace race. It was impossible to overtake. The top 6 could not overtake each other, because in Singapore you need at least 2 seconds. You need at least 2 seconds for you to be able to overtake someone. And nobody in the top 6 had a 2-second advantage over anyone. So overtaking was impossible. Lewis Hamilton, the 5-time world champion, the best driver on the grid and the smartest driver,